The situation between Russia and Ukraine has receded a bit in the news at least, but don't believe that that means that it's not as potentially dangerous a situation as it actually is. In response to some operations by Ukrainian forces against pro-Russian separatists, Russia has begun conducting military exercises near the border with Ukraine. And when I say near, some sources are saying it's up to just 1 mile away from the border. And so if Russia was trying to intimidate the Ukrainians, I don't think they could do anything more than that. But there are some other updates of things that have happened that are going to potentially lead to more conflict in the very near future. A Ukrainian Army Mi-8 helicopter has exploded at the Kramatorsk aerodrome. It was shot in the fuel tank with a rocket-propelled grenade and exploded. The pilot was able to get away. We don't have any reports of any deaths, but the helicopter has been destroyed. In addition, a team of military observers has disappeared and is not able to be contacted right now. It's 3 German soldiers, a German translator, and military observers from the Czech Republic, Poland, Sweden, and Denmark. There's a couple of other things. Both of those obviously are not very good signs if you're hoping for, the conflict to simmer down.
And I mean, just based on what I've been seeing, depending on where those guys were, I mean, there could have been, sort of these what feel like mercenary soldiers, but just citizen soldiers, people dressed up on either side that could, depending on what they believe these guys were doing there, taking them or where they are, because there has been...
Right, but let's not forget that most of those are not really mercenary soldiers. They're definitely Russian troops. We've got photo evidence of Russians in other situations.
No, I just mean, and perhaps fittingly, there are also some pro-Ukrainian people who are just regular people and they're hiding there. I literally just mean the people with guns and hiding their faces.
Yeah, and so the Ukrainians are basically coming back into the region, eastern Ukraine, and saying, hey, wait a minute now, we're not going to let you take these government buildings, etc. They've got an actual embargo on a particular city, and they've surrounded it, and they say nothing else is going to go in, and until you guys surrender and we get our city back. And they consider this an anti-terrorist operation. Of course, everybody thinks that whoever's opposed to them is a terrorist. 5 people have died, and the Russians are now turning around and saying, if there's any more provocation, we're coming in. Okay, we will not allow these guys to create violence in the area or use force against civilians.
And one of the things I think we have to be really careful about, and the helicopter story is one of them, we have to be careful about manufactured provocations too.
Right.
If there's an attack inside a military base and claims of this or that, we don't know what is or isn't true, but it could become the pretext for, and I'm not saying that isn't a true story, I'm just saying there's a lot we don't know, and even something could be manufactured in order to give the Russians a pretext to escalate or whatever else might happen.
So now, look, there's tremendous propaganda on both sides, okay? And that's the case usually in most of these kind of conflicts, but in this one, boy, it's been flying back and forth. In this case, since it's the Ukrainian helicopter blown up, I don't see what the Ukrainians gain out of it because they don't want to start all-out hostilities with the Russians, right?
Yeah.
So it's either the Russians...
that they want more support from their allies. They want the U.S. to get involved more.
It's possible.
So what you say could be entirely true.
And I'm not saying that's the case, but I also, if the Russians have in fact fired a rocket at a Ukrainian helicopter, that would be an amazing escalation too. So I mean, there are a lot of things we just don't know, and that's my point.
And are the pro-Russian thugs who've already killed some people, are they just pro-Russian thugs given an opportunity because they're thuggish by nature, or are they acting under some kind of command?
So there was a great article earlier about this where they explained that, look, these were like 2-bit guys in the areas at the time that had almost no support whatsoever. So when all of a sudden guys with the same uniforms, the same weaponry, the same helmets all show up, that was organized. That's
definitely
right. And so that's not like, oh, hey, it's a group of thugs that used to be in the area, etc. Right? No, it's coordinated. And when they are coordinated, there's some captured audio indicating that the Russians are saying, hey, look, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. You're going to put a guy with a Ukrainian accent in front to do the press so that it seems like it's a local population, etc. And don't do X, Y, and Z. So when they go beyond a certain line, it appears that would also be on purpose. But yes, of course, it's incredibly chaotic, and of course somebody can go off the reservation and not necessarily be ordered by the Kremlin.
If this military machine is not stopped, it will lead to greater numbers of dead and wounded, planned exercises by NATO forces in Poland and the Baltic countries do not foster normalization of the situation surrounding Ukraine either. We are forced to react to such a development of the situation. Like,
By having military exercises.
if this military machine is not stopped, like I read that quote and I was like, no, wait, who says that? That can't be right. That has to be a Ukrainian or someone talking about the Russians. But that's the Russian defense minister. It's
almost like when people talk about the military machine can't be stopped, it's almost like they're talking about a mechanical device that has a life of its own. And we have no moral, we don't operate it. We're not the people inside it. We're not, it just, you push that thing, it's going to chop your head off, it's up to you.
Right, out of my hands.
And that's a stance of somebody who may be looking at reasons to escalate war.
Right, and a common tactic of aggression is to say we were forced to react.
Yeah, totally.
We didn't want to, but after we did a lot of provocation and someone dared to fire back, well, we had to roll our tanks in and take half your country. So, and by the way, the context of this is very important because remember they did a deal and John Kerry shook the hand of the foreign minister, Russian foreign minister, and I said on this program, I said that deal, that's a picture they're going to regret, right? Mm-hmm. That deal is nonsense. Putin is not going to stop. And since they've made that deal, Putin has carried out none of it. Yeah. So now John Kerry and President Obama are threatening left and right saying, look, man, we know you're not doing it, and we're going to do sanctions any day now. You don't have weeks, you have days. And so I don't see this Russian military exercising stopping anytime soon.
Yeah.
I think we're going to go to war. I don't mean we as in the U.S., but in that area, the Ukrainian government is now talking about how the Russians are going to start World War III. That's obviously hyperbolic, but not by that much. I mean, they just took NATO, the people from the OSCE mission, the military observers are Germans, Czech, Poland, Sweden, Denmark.
And do we know those were taken by Russia?
So you brought up the John Kerry saying if Russia continues in this direction, it will not just be a grave mistake, it will be an expensive mistake, talking about impending additional economic sanctions. And it's not just Ukraine who's talking about another world war. Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the German foreign minister, says there's not much time to end this madness. Bear in mind, 600 U.S. troops have just arrived as of today in Latvia to sort of reassure the Baltic states that we have their back. And so, I mean, if you're even a casual observer of this, you should be scared. I mean, we've been talking about it for a few weeks, but it hasn't gotten better.
And when the Russians start this, or when it gets going in earnest, the Russians will say, of course, that because of all the pro-Russians in Ukraine, they'll say that Ukraine devolved into a civil war. And what were we to do? Right. Is there a civil war on our border? Is obviously a threat to our security. We're stepped in. And it will be because of the civil war in Ukraine.
Yeah, and so let me be a little bit more clear about our troops. 600 sent to the region overall, 150 from the 173rd Airborne Brigade just landed in Latvia. Soldiers arrived in Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia, okay? So we're moving troops. This is really serious. And because there's a lot of like, hey, we moved aircraft carriers around, haha, isn't that funny? Like, there's a lot of that huffing and puffing that goes on in a lot of these conflicts as they're brewing. But not like we're moving ground troops in and we're putting them in positions that you better not fire there, otherwise we'll go to war with you, right? So this is incredibly scary stuff. I keep saying this because I think we have grown up in a time where we've had plenty of wars, but nothing of this scale, right?
Not with Russia.
Not with Russia. And so people feel like, oh, it can't happen.
Right.
Except it looks like it's in the middle of happening.